Good evening and welcome to An Evening with Robert Patrick. My name is Dan Berkowitz. I'm the co-chair of the Alliance of Los Angeles Playwrights. And Robert Patrick is the author of more than 60 published plays, including the international hit Kennedy's Children, which won a Tony Award for Shirley Knight, and The Haunted Host, which gave Harvey Fierstein his first non-drag theater role. I first met Robert many years ago in New York when I saw his Blue is for Boys, the first play about gay teenagers, which was honored by two successive Manhattan borough presidents with proclamations of Blue is for Boys weekends. Last fall, ALAP inducted Robert as its first honorary member. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Patrick. I'm going to just ask you some questions, and please feel free to ramble. One of the things that I was watching an interview with you, it was with a young man in Minnesota or Wisconsin or some godforsaken place, and you said that you get irritated when people ask you, how do you get ideas, or where do you get ideas, because the way you put it was, how can you not get ideas for plays? Everything is an idea.
Okay. Yes, that was a young man who is very embarrassed now. That was about 30 years ago. He's very embarrassed now that they made a video of that interview and it's online. But I think he has some very good questions. Playwriting. I meant what I said, although it was somewhat jocular. There are so many things around one at any given moment to write a play or a poem or a novel about, or paint a picture or write a song, whatever it is that you express yourself in. I'm sure all of you know that getting the idea is really no problem. But there are people who have been sort of pressurized or conditioned to think that they have to be more in control than is really necessary for an artist to be. And there are a number of ways to break that down. Is this of any interest?
Yeah.
The biggest obstacle to writing, and I dare say to any art form, is that to think of oneself rather than of one's characters. If you are sitting thinking, can I do this? Do I have talent? Am I a playwright? Am I doing this right? Am I going to succeed? You are not thinking of your characters. You're thinking of yourself. It's not exactly vanity. It's the opposite of vanity. It's what I call negative narcissism. But it's just as distracting and crippling as positive narcissism. You're not there to think of yourself. You're there to think of Hamlet and Ophelia, or George and Martha, or Blanche and Stanley. What does she say? What does he say? What does she say? What does he say? And a lot of people don't know the difference between that and thinking, can I write this play? That's nothing. What play? You haven't got one written yet. What do you mean, is this play? The important thing is to get it on paper. And you do have fantasies running through your mind, okay? This is what I call the E equals MC squared of playwriting. A playwright, 1, has a fantasy. 2, writes it down so that 3, other artists may recreate it, so that 4, an audience may experience it. And the it in every case is that original fantasy you have. So when you talk about how do you get an idea for a play, my dear, every one of us has all the time stories running in our heads. What you should have said to that bitchy bartender, what you should have done for that homeless person on the street, what you would like to say to your landlord. Or these are petty, but all of us have these running all the time. Sometimes we get an elevator, we do an entire trilogy in our heads by the time we get to the appointment that we've been trying to predict, to read, to control. Right? Those are ideas for plays. See, a lot of times people think that an idea for a play must be like some play they've seen before. And maybe you've never seen a play about somebody who turns around at the corner and goes back and asks the homeless person to their home, which is what you've been thinking of doing and wondering what would happen if I did. Well, nobody had written a play like Streetcar Named Desire before Tennessee Williams wrote it. And nobody needs to write another one because we have that one. So you not only have ideas for plays running through your head, you have plays running through your head night and day. Okay? Now sometimes it's hard to recognize, or it's hard to think that you are important enough that your fantasies would be there. That's thinking of yourself again. You know, not thinking of the characters. What was it you were going to say to the homeless person? What was it you were afraid they'd say back? What was it you thought you might say back to overcome their anger or fear or nausea or whatever that you ran into? You know, that's how you write a play, line by line, word by word, deed by deed. And finally it's done. But sometimes people just don't think that they and their fantasies are interesting enough to interest those other people in step 4, that audience that is going to experience your fantasy. So people, also a lot of people say, well, I don't want to write fantasies, I want to write reality. Okay? You can always go to history or fact. You know, Shaw read everything there was to read about St. Joan and the Middle Ages and Protestantism and Catholicism, all of it. And then he sat down and wrote a play in which everybody talks like George Bernard Shaw. You will, if you were to set out and write a play about St. Joan, everybody in it would undoubtedly talk like you. Or they wouldn't talk at all, because if you were trying to write them so they talked like people in Shaw's St. Joan, you would get so tired and so bored because you wouldn't really be tapping your own energy at all. In other words, Shaw didn't write about St. Joan. Shaw wrote his fantasy of St. Joan. He just read enough St. Joan that he began to have fantasies about her and the king and the dukes and the soldiers and out came. But it was his fantasy. I saw a play the other night, a wonderful play. Were any of you there to see Billy and Ray over at the Blank Theater? Superb play about Billy Wilder and Raymond Chandler writing Double Indemnity. Absolutely riveting. And I'm sure the author just researched it till he was falling apart. But no way did we hear any voice on that stage except his. And it's a wonderful voice. He made Raymond Chandler and Billy Wilder wisecrackers. Now, they may well have been wisecrackers, and that may have given him permission. You know, he may have read, oh, these guys threw a lot of wisecracks at each other. And then he came up with what his wisecracks and his style. And it's, if you see it played anywhere, go. It's wonderful. But that was his fantasy about how Billy Wilder and Raymond Chandler wrote. Although deep down, it may have been his fantasy about how he wishes some father figure like Billy Wilder would come and bully him into writing the way Billy Wilder in the play bullies Raymond Chandler. We'll never know. But somewhere there was his fantasy that he didn't think was interesting enough, but he covered it up with glittering historical people and justified it because it's factual and true. Well, let me tell you, if you wrote about Billy and Ray, it wouldn't be like his play. Do we need more examples? The Lion in Winter. You all know The Lion in Winter? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure that Mr. Goldman read every word that's ever been written about these people. There must be billions of words. But come on, is that backstage bitchery or not? So having all those facts and all those interesting incidents and people and relationships in his head freed him to do what he obviously does better than anybody, backstage bitchery. And it's marvelous. So, what?
I just wanted, because what you're talking about now is taking the fantasy and making it into the play. What kind of process do you use, for example, when you're writing?
It's different for everyone. I'm obsessive. If I decide something's worth writing, I just sit down and write it, and I don't do anything else.
I mean, do you plot it out?
No,
do you outline it? Just
yeah. Like my favorite play of mine is called Michelangelo's Models, and well, this is show you sort of the transformation things can go through. I was working with this wonderful young company in New York. I wrote plays for those actors. They were my fantasy. What would I like to see them do? And I wrote play after play for them. The Fourth E Company, they were called. God bless them. And then one day, I had an idea. I love painting. I worship painters. If I had a trace of talent, I would have been a painter, not a playwright. And so I've studied them all my life. And I happened to be reading about Michelangelo and Leonardo and the Renaissance and all of that right then. And I had this idea I thought, I want to do 3. We had also been auditioning boys for a play because we didn't have any very young guys in our company, so we needed a bunch for a play we were doing. And so these, why is that funny? And so
there are never enough young boys in any
And so, I'd been going through this experience of auditioning these boys, and I suddenly had an idea. It would be like 3 panels, like a Renaissance art triptych. Yeah, 3 panels, and Michelangelo would be painting or sculpting 3 different boys, and his conversations with them would reveal 3 different aspects of art or theater. You know what you go through. You know, how do you decide that this boy is going to be Adam? And this one is going to be God, and this one is going to be an archangel, you know, just like auditioning. And I sat down and looked at the paper, and I said, you know, Michelangelo's studio, 1564, whatever it was. And quite without my having anything to say about it, a beautiful young naked boy came on and said, "No, Michelangelo, no. I said no and I meant no. I didn't come here tonight to pose," and started dressing. I said, well, and I brought Michelangelo over, rubbing his face and saying, well, you know, it's my birthday. What do you want to give me? I said, yeah, you told me there'd be a party with other people here. And I said, wow, it just poured, you know, this fantasy. And then in came this person and that person. And then in came Leonardo. And I said, oh, I'm going to have Leonardo bring Andrea del Sarto. Because Andrea del Sarto was called the perfect painter. Absolutely, his work's a little cold, but it's perfect. And I thought that would be a nice contrast to the emotionalism of Michelangelo's work. So Michelangelo said, I don't believe I know your young friend. And Leonardo said, Michelangelo, let me introduce Raphael de Santi. I said, wait a minute, that's not supposed to be Raphael. Well, let's see where it goes. And he turned out to be the perfect person because Raphael was a very charming and witty and wise young man who avoided the excesses that ruined Leonardo's and Michelangelo's life. So it was the perfect balance to them. But none of this happened by my will. And my little triptych play never got written. I wrote a big 3-act, almost Shakespearean in form play with about half a dozen romantic subplots and complications and climaxes. And, you know, it just came out. But, I mean, part of the reason it came out was all my life I've loved big romantic plays, had never written one on that scale. And I guess all the time it had just been building up in me. And here were the perfect people to... Okay, did you ever see the movie, the one where Charlton Heston plays Michelangelo, The High and the Mighty, or The
Agony and the Ecstasy.
Right, The Agony and the Ecstasy. Where he's lying on the battlefield and he looks up in the air and sees clouds, sees beautiful clouds moving around, and suddenly he gets the idea for God touching the finger of Adam. In other words, the form came first, beautiful rolling shapes, and then because he was Christian and troubled and always looking for a father, the form was filled in with the subject matter of God touching Adam's finger and giving him life. Well, that can happen too. You can just be so in love with a form or with a sound, maybe the sound of somebody's conversation. Could even be another writer's conversation. How many of you know the work of a writer from the 50s named Gene Kerr?
Yeah.
Mary Mary.
Yeah.
Finishing Touches, King of Hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Langford Wilson and I always thought she was the unappreciated great American playwright. Nobody was ever funnier.
Walter Kerr's wife.
Yes. When I wrote my first play, The Haunted Host, I know I was just trying to sound like Gene Kerr. Now, I couldn't quite sound like her, but having that model, that was the clouds in the sky, was Gene Kerr's wonderful tippy-tappy rhythms. And so my characters talked like that. They didn't say things her characters would say. They weren't in the situation her characters would be in. Now, is any of this making any sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
These are all different ways, form, content, fantasy, honesty, sheer curiosity. These are all different ways to approach, to get to that all-important thing, putting one word after another on a page. A lot of people, especially today when people are so anxious, one could go into the reasons why people are so anxious today, but people are much more anxious as a group today than ever. And many just feel like, I don't want to waste time writing a practice play. I must, I'm not going to write anything until I know I've got a Broadway hit movie sale 10-year series idea. Well, when you get the idea for that Broadway hit movie sale series, you're not going to know how to write. And a lot of I've had young people just absolutely refuse when I taught some playwriting classes. Absolutely refuse to just sit and write some dialogue. They said, what if it's no good? I said, it doesn't matter. If a painter picks up his first brush and starts putting paint on, it's to learn how paint goes on canvas and how one color looks next to the other and what kind of pressure makes what kind of surface on the paint. It's not to sell the painting. But somehow people think writing is, people who will understand that think, or will understand a dancer has to do boring exercises for years before they can dance. Doesn't understand that you have to learn to put words next to each other for certain effects. It's just amazing. They think writing is something all done in the head, and the putting on paper is a sort of last resort.
Well, it's sort of like what you said, that the subject matter really doesn't have anything to do with it. It's the style, the form, what you've been talking about. Whether
Yeah,
it's a big
although the subject matter may inspire you.
Mm-hmm. But that's really not nearly as important as the shape of it, the way you...
Well, eventually you've got to think of the artistic quality of the thing. Has it got a shape like that? Is it dot, 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 dot? What are you writing? Are you writing little short scenes to build up to a big, long climax? Are you writing rolling, loose scenes that are slowly going to get tighter and tighter and tighter until the climax happens, And any subject matter will do to fill it, but the only subject matter that's going to get you to write is one that you obsess with. That's another thing. A lot of people are afraid to be obsessed. They think, I'm going to write 15 minutes a day. Now that's good. No, really, a lot of people have busy lives. That's good. But when you finally get the idea for the play you're not going to write 15 minutes. You're going to tell your kids there's some toaster pops. You're going to tell your husband, yeah, that sure will do another day. You must, because you're on a ride. You feel it. You're at the top. You're going to toboggan down, and you've got to write that crash at the bottom clearly. And it's the most important thing in the world. If it's not the most important thing in the world, you won't do it. Where were we?
I think we were in Kansas.
Is any of this making any sense?
Yes. Now, you see, here you are talking about playwriting and the passion of it and all that, and yet in one of those interviews you said you really don't belong in the theater. What are you talking about?
Oh, I know the one you mean. Okay. There really wasn't much theater where I came from, just the school show. And we moved around a lot. Some years I wasn't. I never went to one school for a whole year until my senior year of high school. So often, I didn't even see the school show. But I did get to be in a junior high operetta, and I got to be in the 1955 Roswell High School production of Our Town. I played the outcast artist. And I wasn't yet. So I didn't know theater as theater. Theater was something Betty Davis did in movies, mostly. But in college, I majored in theater, but I was such a mess. Having moved around all that time, I didn't know how to relate to people. I didn't know. I wasn't socialized at all. I was like a wild animal loose among tame ones. I didn't know how to behave. I didn't know how to make friends. I didn't know how to be good to friends and I dropped out of show after show. They just kept casting me in lead because apparently I talked loud. I think that was all that was required in college. And I would quit a week into rehearsal. So after a while, the teacher cast somebody in the secondary role that could also do the lead, because they figured I'd drop out. All the men would just move up a notch. Mm-hmm. And then I even stopped trying out and stopped going to classes, but that's all another story. So I really didn't know anything about theater. And then I was washing dishes in Santa Fe. And my roommate got an offer to go to Kennebunkport, Maine, and wash dishes at the Summer Stock Theater there. He had done it the year before. And he didn't want to go. He said, but my roommate would like to go. So I said, fine, and they sent me a bus fare, and I went. And I spent a summer in stock at Kennebunkport, one of the last years of summer stock. And it was wonderful. They worked me. They taught me everything. They were willing to use me 24 hours a day. You know, Bill was said, man the box office, turn the turntable, make a costume. It was wonderful. I really learned everything in 3 months, you know, basically that I was ever going to know about theater. So I was wired for it. And then I stopped off in New York and wandered into the Cafe Chino and never left. By sheer luck, in my first half hour in New York. I was just stopping over to see Greenwich Village for a day, and then I was going home. But I wandered into the Cafe Chino, and there was no question at all. I stayed. So I got into theater mainly to be around the wonderful people at the Chino and the wonderful atmosphere of the Chino. I was there for 3 years doing what I call temple slaving. I would come from my office job each day and shop or mop or take out the garbage, clean, do anything just to be allowed to be there. And people, you know, I was around, so people would put me to running lights or making costumes and stuff and all that. And after 3 years of daily absorption in theater, I got an idea for a play. And only because there was the Chino, wrote it. Should I tell the whole story? Mm-hmm. I took the play in and said to Joe, I wrote a play, you should do it. Joe, without even looking at it, tossed it over his shoulder to the garbage can. He said, you don't want to be a playwright, Bob. Playwrights are terrible people. You're a good guy, you pull your weight around here, you'll thank me someday. And I said, oh, all right. And Lanford Wilson happened to be there. And Lanford was my roommate, he had read the play. He said, Joe, Bob works hard around here. You ought to do his little play. And if you don't, I won't do any more plays here. Joe said, a palace rebellion. Reached over, got my play, and dusted the coffee grounds off up and said, okay, we'll do it, but you'll be sorry. And he was right, of course. I turned into what I am today. It was only something I did because I was there. I've always said if Joe had run a bowling alley, all of us would have been champion bowlers. A lot of us who came in there had no background or interest in theater. It was only to be around Joe and the wonderful people that accumulated around him. So then people were very pleased with the play, and it behooved me to write more. And I got interested in what I was doing. You know, I became interested in the craft and the art and the popularity, the occasional money, and things like my first play was, many people call it the first gay play, but they mean of a certain sort, where the gay person is a hero rather than a victim. And I played it. I played the gay role. So one night, while the straight boy who's trying to take advantage of me was having his monologue, I leaned on a table because we were that close to the people. And there was this boy there, young boy. Well, a few nights later when I leaned on the table, he was there again with two older people. And he said quietly to them, Mom, Dad, you see that boy, that man? He's playing a homosexual. That's why I wanted to bring you here. I'm like him, Mom and Dad. I'm gay. And I realized, you know, wow, this is more than just fun. So on many levels, I became interested in playwriting, what I was doing. But it was always mainly to be around these wonderful people. Even when it became, you know, very lucrative, and when I got to be well known and traveled all over the world and all of that, mostly I was just collecting great stories to tell people about it, you know, to tell the wonderful people in New York about the wonderful people in Cape Town, the wonderful people in Vienna about the wonderful people in Caracas. And it was all that. But a couple of years ago, they had a bunch of us to New York to be in a TV show about the Cafe Chino. And it was the first time I'd seen Lanford in some years. He'd been ill and hadn't been traveling. And we were on together, and we were waiting outside for cars to pick us up. And I said, Lanford and his friend had moved in with me the day they hit New York, and had, after a couple of months, got me thrown out of my apartment because they never paid any rent. They lied to me and told me they were paying the rent. So anyway, that's 30 years earlier or more. So Lamper and I are waiting for our cars, and I said to him, I'll never know what it was that I had that let me be around all of you beautiful people. And Lampert said, just like a Lampert Wilson character, you had a job, Bob. But I've always felt that was, that's why I got in theater, because I got a paycheck and I could feed people and house them. I don't know if you all know one of LA's most prominent actresses, Jackie Lynn Colton. Jackie is from the Chino and off Broadway. Seems to be in a play a week here in LA. Jackie can confirm some of what I'm talking about, that people became artists to be around Joe and Ellen Stewart, and then around the other artists, just to be in the most... The 60s, I'm sorry for those of you who are too young, the 60s were the best time in the history of the world to be young. And New York was the best place, and we lucked out.
And everybody helped everybody else build their sets and put on their plays.
Oh, there was no question of it.
It was incredible.
You'd walk by a theater and you'd hear noise and you'd decide you would say, what are you doing? Didn't even have to ask. You'd say, oh, can I help? Because you were putting in shows. God knows there was no money in it. It wasn't like we were working for salaries. When was the first time you got paid? How long had you been doing it?
I actually got $5 for being an understudy in The Hostage. I have one line.
Oh, right, you told me that story.
And then I got paid for being a puppeteer at Dozari Marionettes.
But I had been doing plays, and must have done 50 productions already at various theaters for 4 or 5 years before somebody finally gave me $50 to publish a play. And I just thought that was cute. As it comes up, look, I got money for playwriting.
We passed a hat at the cafe.
Oh, yeah.
And then Joe would make us a ham sandwich and a cup of coffee, and we'd maybe make $11 for 3 shows.
Which is probably what Joe made for the whole month after feeding us for free. I'm sorry.
But actually, talk a little bit about what happened when suddenly Kennedy's Children became the international hit.
Oh, well, there's a lot of exposition to get to that. Well, let's see. Okay, I was... Joe Chino was dead, and the Chino was closed, and Off-Broadway had changed enormously. People were getting grants. See, what made Off-Broadway different from any other theaters in the history of the world was there was no money involved. Places like the Cafe Chino made their living some other way. The plays didn't have to be popular. They didn't have to please an audience. They didn't have to please critics. They didn't have to please police. They didn't have to please the church or the academics. It was the first time in history when theater was done as an individual expressive art form. At the Cafe Chino in the 60s, theater entered the modern era that the other arts had entered in Paris 100 years before. I mean, it was the primal moment in theater history. And that all changed when people started getting grants. Suddenly, we weren't acting in coffee houses or bars or churches or art galleries or bookstores. We were acting in theaters. And they had schedules. And they had philosophies. And the producers weren't busy selling books or coffee. They were busy sketching out next season and deciding on the theme and the political angle they should. You know, I mean, it was a whole other world. We weren't just coming in and saying, hey, I got a play, and they say, okay, you open Thursday. They wanted to read the plays now and approve of them. And then because they were trying for grants, the grant people had to approve of what we were doing. You know, and it just, not that there wasn't great work done and done even now, but it was very different from the children's paradise that we were brought up in. And I just kicked around from theater to theater. I was the go-to guy. If somebody's show didn't show up, they call me and say, Bob, can you come in Tuesday? We've got a graveyard set and no money, and the show isn't coming in. So I would go in and do a show. I'd whip out a script that took place in a graveyard and tell the guy in the box office, send any actors that come through up. I'll write them a role. And, you know, I did that many times. And it all got pretty crazy. And I don't know how much detail to go into. I fell in love with a man, okay? I used to fall in love with men for their talent. I felt really superior because of that. Well, it turns out falling in love with a man for his talent is not a bit smarter than falling in love with him for his looks. Talent doesn't mean somebody's a decent or intelligent or sensible human being any more than good looks do. Well, I fell in love with... Have any of you ever heard on YouTube, have you ever heard me sing the song of the Catholic Boy?
Yes.
Well, that was written about this fellow. His name was Joe Pichette. He's generally agreed to be one of the 3 greatest artists off-Broadway ever produced. When I say off-Broadway, I mean underground theater up to 1970 in New York. And Joe Pichette and a lighting man named John P. Dodd and a writer-actor named Jeff Weiss are generally agreed to be the 3 outstanding talents of the period. Well, Joe was one of them. The moment I saw him on stage in somebody else's play, I knew I must write for him. I must have that voice saying my words. And for 10 years, I lived to write for Joe Pichette, even if he was too drunk to be in my plays, or if he forgot he'd promised to be in a play of mine and was in somebody else's play, or he was a real mess. And I inherited, he was my first middle-class lover. And someday we will talk about middle-class men. Middle class is a philosophy. When I use the word to indicate a certain philosophy of life, not necessarily an economic level. Middle class men fall in love with wild free bohemians and then relentlessly destroy them and try to make them into middle class men. Joe's way of doing that was to kill himself with drink because I wasn't middle class. Well, anyway, you have to know that. You have to know that I had lost the world that I loved. And I was not going to get the man that I loved, who was the only thing I cared about. And so somebody asked me to come out to LA and start La Mama Hollywood. And Miss Colton and I and a woman named Jean Purse started La Mama Hollywood. Well, I was not prepared for certain differences in the thinking of actors in LA and New York. And I freaked out. I couldn't take it. Miss Colton is stronger than I. And she kept it running and did some really esteemed shows after I left. But I was homeless, broke, and crazy in LA. And in fact, I was about to get evicted from my apartment, and my phone was going to get cut off. And the only reason it wasn't cut off, the only reason I was even getting incoming calls, was it turned out that the phone worker who was calling and telling me I was going to get cut off was a fan of my plays. So he was eking it out as long as he could. Well, I had just finished talking with him. He said, "This is your last day. This afternoon is the last time you get calls. I just can't go anymore." I said, "Sure, I understand. Thank you for all you've done." And I hung up and the phone rang. My last call, it was my agent in New York. She said, "How are you going to get to New York?" I said, "Dead and buried, I'll come to New York again." She said, "Well, you've got to get yourself to New York because the people in London who want to do your play, Kennedy's Children, will only pay your fare from New York." And I said, "Will they give me a place to live?" She says, "Yes, they have rooms over the bar." I said, "Okay, I'll get to New York somehow." And I hung up and I thought, how am I going to get money to get to New York? And then I remembered I'd heard that some kids in Chicago were doing pirate productions of my play, The Haunted Host. So I went out on the street and I ran into this porn star I knew, Jamie Gillis. Anybody remember Jamie Gillis? And I borrowed a quarter from him and I called at the Drama Shelter in Chicago. It wasn't called the Drama Shelter, but at the Drama Shelter so they could be first in alphabetical listings. And I said, "This is Robert Patrick. I hear you've been stealing my play." And they said, "Oh my God, we've been looking everywhere for you. We have thousands of dollars in royalties saved up for you. Where are you?" And they got me on a plane and got me there. And it was wonderful. They were wonderful people. I worked with them for a year. Mainly, first of all, I got there, they gave me money. I started an affair with one of them, and he even went to the airport with me. That's love. So I went to London, and sure enough, they had a room upstairs. They shoved aside coal and potatoes, and I slept in a corner of the storeroom, but at least it was a roof. And so they were going to do the play. They didn't believe the play had a chance in the world, but they were bankrupt and were going to have to close. And they thought they might as well close with a play they liked. So they got together, rehearsed, we did the play. I ran all over London, And we opened, and the next morning I signed contracts for its translation into 60 languages. And there were 3 very drunk years that ensued. I'm sorry, I know this all sounds very sordid, but you know, it's how it is. I drank from Cape Town to Anchorage, from Caracas to Vienna. I went everywhere. I went anywhere that they were doing the play. I had a wonderful time. Met thousands of wonderful people. All of it meant absolutely nothing to me because Joe Pichette didn't love me. I'm sorry. I brought when I saw that I had become quite a celebrity in London, I let someone do a production of The Haunted Host on condition they would bring Joe over to be in it, because I'd always longed to see him play it anyway. I mean, and by this time I was getting pretty cagey. I was also sort of in love with another young man, and I had them bring him over to play the boy. My thought was, one of them, when they see me dining with John Gielgud, one of them is going to fall in love with me. They fell in love with each other.
Ah, the joys of celebrity.
And I came back to America and just very, very nearly ready to drink myself to death. I was not an alcoholic. I was a drunk. There's a very distinct difference, as I'm sure you all know. After I quit drinking, I went to AA for a while. I had nothing in common with them. I'm not like that. I'm a different kind of drunk. I was drinking to kill myself. I wasn't drinking to get over anything or to punish anyone or anything. I was drinking to kill myself. And once I stopped wanting to kill myself, I didn't want to drink anymore. But anyway, so I was back in America just about ready to drink myself to death. And in my agent's office, I saw a magazine called Dramatics. And it turned out to be the organ of a high school theater club, the International Thespian Society, with chapters in all 50 states. And I called them and said, could you use a speaker, teacher, anything? They said yes. So for the next 10 years, I spent most of my time, I didn't spend most of my time doing anything. I did everything all the time. I continued to do plays more than ever, but I was also in between traveling to every state but Hawaii for the thespians. And I would go to schools and teach or talk or just tell them about theater, or do a little day seminar in playwriting, or direct some scenes in an acting class, whatever. And it was wonderful. People would ask me why I did it. They could almost never pay, by the way. What we'd do is some rich school would offer to fly me to San Francisco. And I'd say, no, buy me a month-long Greyhound bus pass. And on the way to you, I can stop at 10 schools that can't afford to bring me. So I did over 1,000 schools in 10 years. Did about 100 a year. Schools and festivals. I mean, they weren't all individual schools. Sometimes they had an annual festival in Muncie at a university called Ball University. And I used to love to go just so I could get the shirt that said Ball U. Anyway, that was an incredibly happy, fulfilling time in my life. I was doing plays in theaters all over the world. That's when I went to Caracas and Vienna, for instance. And in the meantime, there was always a school that wanted me. And it was just marvelous. And at the end of it, my agent started, am I making sense? Mm-hmm. My agent started going crazy. And it was really unpleasant. She really started losing her mind. And I couldn't get out of the relationship with her. She was embedded, as they say, with all of my plays that Samuel French published. By this time, French had about 20 or 25 of my plays. And the only way I could get out of having to deal with her was to get rid of the plays. So I called Samuel French and said, how would you like to buy my plays outright? Instead of, you taking 10% and me getting 9%, you just buy them, then you get, They didn't want to do it. They said, we don't like to do that. And I insisted, so they bought them. So that was in 1980. So for 32 years, I haven't owned any of those plays that get done so much. I was very stupid. It was a very stupid thing to do. I assumed that my new place would bring me at least a minimal income. But they brought less and less, and I never got any more published. By 1990, I was sleeping in light booths in theaters, and I was in fact choosing the theaters to do plays in by how big and comfortable their light booth looked. And it was entirely my doing, you understand. Nobody's to blame, but I was down and out and a wreck in every respect. And then, tell me if I go into one.
No.
And then one day in December of 1990, I was doing a show at La Mama, one of my favorite, Hello Bob. And it's online. You can see that production. It was the first show I got a full videotape of, and it's online. You can see it. And I saw a sofa on 2nd Avenue. I said, oh, that'd be great for the show. So I put it on my back, and I started walking along, and it started raining. And the sofa got heavier and heavier. And I couldn't put it down, I was walking along. Nobody even made a move to help me as they passed. And I suddenly realized, for 30 years, these people have been seeing me walk down the streets with sofas on my back for shows. It doesn't even occur to them that I might be in trouble or needy. I'm just part of the scenery. I'm this funny old man who carries sofas on his back. So I got around the corner and got to La Mama. Fortunately, La Mama doesn't have steps leading up to it, and the door was open, so I got in the lobby. Fortunately, we were in the first floor theater and the door was open, so I was able, practically on my knees by now, to get this sofa to the stage. Fortunately, it wasn't a raised stage, and I got on the stage and I just let it fall on me. And I'm lying there trapped under this soaking, reeking sofa off the street. And my favorite actress, Carol Nelson, for whom I wrote dozens of plays, came in from her office job with a bag with 2 coffees in it. And she said, hi, Bob. Would you like me to lift that off of you? And I said, that would be very nice. So she did, and I got out. She took out the coffee and handed me one. She sat there. She said, Bob, there's something I've always wanted to ask you. I know why I do this. It makes me feel like I'm not just an office worker, and I get praised, and I get rave reviews, and people applaud me. And sometimes they recognize me in the street, and I get to wear all kinds of pretty clothes. But I've always wanted to ask you, why do you do it? And in December 1990, I had no answer for her. And that's when I left theater, and very soon after left to go to, I had no money at all. I went to live with family in a little upstate California town called Atwater. And that was when my real education began, because I had not been in the real world for 30 years. I left it in 1961, and I went back to it in 1991. For 30 years, I had lived in theater, internationally, with the most daring, intelligent, cultivated, sophisticated, compassionate people in the world. And I stepped out of that back into the real world. And when I left the real world in 1961, the terrible thing about it, about my class of people in America, was ignorance and indifference. That was what I fled. Some of you older people here may know what I'm talking about. The utter indifference and ignorance. What I came back to was terror and hatred. What the 60s had done to people in my class, at least, was to make them afraid of everything. They started out being afraid of their own children when the hippie thing started. Then they became afraid of their politicians as the hippies pointed out what they were doing. They became afraid of their police when they saw the police shooting their kids. And because of things that they heard on TV, they became afraid of the food they ate. They became afraid of the air they breathed. They became afraid of the cars they drove, the very clothes they wore. They were just riddled with fear and panic. And I lived for 2 years in that atmosphere. And I wrote a play about it, which I can't get anyone to produce, called Heterosexuals. Because the me character in it says at the start, I hadn't been among heterosexuals for 30 years. And that's how he regards it. Friends came from San Francisco and Los Angeles to visit me, and were very worried about me. And I guess I look at photographs of myself from Atwater, and I do look loony. I'm skinny as a rail because I was exercising. I left the house. I stayed out of the house as much as I could because the TV was never off. And so I would walk. I walked compulsively. I was thin as a rail, looked great, and I looked loony. And my friend said, Bob, you really need to get out of here. You're headed for a nervous breakdown. And then a friend offered me a job in public relations in LA in '93, and I came here. And my friends, I was so jumpy, they said, Bob, you're like somebody just let out of prison. Relax, no one is going to criticize you. And so I worked in public relations, and then that friend died, and I found work as a ghostwriter, which is how many of you ever done ghostwriting? Have you? Isn't it interesting? Wow, you could talk forever about that. What an experience. And then the kids I was ghostwriting for learned, they said from me, how to do it, and dropped me. They didn't need me anymore, and they weren't about to take me to their bosses and say, here's the guy that's been ghostwriting for me. So that disappeared, and I found work reviewing adult DVDs, reviewing porn DVDs, which is what I did till recently. And a couple of years ago, that market started dropping off. I used to get 100 a month, which kept me very comfortably. And now I'm lucky if I get a dozen a month. So things are not great. But I'll find something to do.
Tell us what you think of what's going on in the country right now politically.
Oh, I'm not a political thinker. I don't even write political plays.
Well, maybe it's time you did.
Do you need to leave?
Maybe.
Does anyone else need to leave?
He'll be coming.
Okay. Stop me with a question if this gets to be too
Well,
trivial.
actually, what I want to ask is, because you put it on the poster, the IQ, art, homosexuality, which does America hate most?
I think IQ, even art, they like better than, right, especially now in this climate of fear. Awful lot of Americans hate anyone who seems to know anything. I don't know how they get around that when they go to experts, because they're always going to experts about everything. But I think face to face with someone on their own level who seems to know anything, they feel nothing but rage. So they will deny that person being superior to them by going to someone they acknowledge as knowledgeable. And I think that's where my God, they're experts in everything now, and perfectly ordinary people go to them. It's not like only rich people used to go to consultants or advisors or this or that. But I know perfectly ordinary people now who have gurus and counselors and Am I answering your question?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
But
They're very afraid.
before I open it to questions from the
Yeah.
audience, I just want to do a little bit, and I did give you a bit of warning on this. We're going to play a little game called...
Well, can I just expand this a little bit?
Okay.
I'm very sorry. He asked me to talk about this politically. I love to talk about it, but I'll just be brief because I think I'm very dull on it. I seem to see things simpler than other people do. Maybe it's because I'm a playwright and I have to see things in terms of, moment-to-moment reactions. But it seems to me the real source of much of what's wrong with America politically now is on the individual. It springs from individuals, from trends that encompass a whole lot of individuals who wind up voting. And I think the big change, certainly between people of my generation and those that came after, is television, but in a certain way. Most of the people that we know now, perhaps some of you, I can't really see you, were sat down as teeny tiny babies for their whole lives in front of television, and they were told, you are ugly, you smell bad, your hair is awful, your breath smells, your teeth are not white enough, you do not have the latest clothes. In other words, they are made to hate themselves. This to me is a much greater danger than the violence and sex and drugs that, people say TV encourages violence, sex, and drugs. TV doesn't only encourage, TV installs self-hatred in children. An adult may be old enough to bat it off, but little tiny kids who were made to hate themselves, several generations of them now, are running much of the world. And they're very much afflicted with what I call negative narcissism. In a word, they think they're sick. They think there's something terribly wrong with them. They are just like a sick person. And we all know how awful it is to be around a sick person. Of necessity, sick people think only about themselves, right? We've got millions of Americans out there who are incapable of thinking of anything except, I wonder if I smell all right. I wonder if I'm standing straight. I wonder if this dress is really in fashion. I wonder if my hair is still full. I wonder if that teeth whitener works. They're absolutely armored against anything remotely resembling a relationship. And I really think some of the people they vote for reflect their self-hatred in very strong ways. Okay, that's the nearest thing I have to a political philosophy. And if you ask me about the economy, I just say, hey, they move the jobs. Don't listen to all the big nabobs on Wall Street. They move the jobs, that's why we're poor. Okay, now ask a question. Sorry, I told you I was dull.
Okay, well, this is a little game called Let's Speak Ill of the Dead. And we're taking you back a little bit in time, but I'm just going to throw out a few names, and please be as rude as you would like. Shelley Winters.
Oh, I couldn't be rude about Shelley. You know this story. I was in Seattle, directing Kennedy's Children at the Seattle Rep. There was a thunderstorm, as there often is. We were doing lights, and it was incredible because every time there was a thunder, the lights would go off, and we'd have to start all over, and it was insane. And the crew, it had a very primitive setup where I was like half a block from the crew, and it was just crazy. And the phone rang. It was my agent. She said, "How do you feel about Shelley Winters taking over for Barbara Montgomery in Kennedy's Children on the road?" I said, "Oh, it sounds great. Sounds great, fine. I'm busy, bye." And I hung up. And then a few days later, I happened to be passing through New York on my way to England or somewhere. And I called my agent to see if she had any mail for me. She said, "Oh, you're in town. Rush down to the Golden Theater and you can see the rehearsal of the Shelley Winters Company of Kennedy's Children." I said, "The Shelley Winters Company?" So I went down. Okay. Unbeknownst, nobody had warned me. Now, I really think there is no fraternity in show business after all, like there used to be, because you'd think the moment people heard Shelley was going into it, I would have gotten calls from all over the world. Nobody warned me. I got in the theater. Shelley was on stage playing my impoverished schoolteacher in a Balmain cocktail dress, a fur stole, diamonds, and what's more, on stage with her, she had 2 working phones so she could keep up with her daughter who was starting college and the family of an ex-husband who had been through an earthquake in Italy. Right? She also had a dog and a maid who would come and get the dog. Okay. The touring company had all quit when they heard that Shelley was coming into it. So on stage were Sally Kirkland playing the hippie, I forgot, a black actor playing the soldier, Farley Granger playing the gay actor, and Anne Wedgwood playing the sex goddess. Anne Wedgwood said the words that I'd written beautifully and with depth and warmth. The other 4 said anything that came into their heads because Shelley had told them it's all monologues, so we don't have cues, so we can improvise like we do at Actors Studio. Not one word that I wrote were they saying. I went directly to a phone and called Equity and said, "I want to close the show." They said, "Why?" And I told them. They said, "Well, who's the star you were talking about?" I said, "Shelley Winters." They said, "Oh, she's too big. We can't do anything to her." And hung up. I called the producer who conveniently had to leave town. I went to Chicago with Shelley and company, begging Shelley to quit the show. I said, "I'll say you're sick. I'll say you died. I'll say anything." She said, "Why, Bob, you'll make me think you don't want me to be in your play." And it was a nightmare. I'd go down to the theater and a show that, the show, depending on what they took it in their heads to say, would be an hour longer or an hour shorter than it had been on Broadway. Especially if Shelley got going on Trigby Lee and Doug Hammarskjöld being gay, or what she would have done to make Hitler not invade Poland. Or I can't tell you. Just anything came to her head. Farley Granger conveniently forgot any lines that showed that his character was gay. The guy playing the soldier had understandably felt funny speaking in these white bread tones of my soldier and kept trying to translate it into Ebonics. And the role made no sense the way he translated. And Sally Kirkland spent all her time telling about her current affair with Bob Dylan. It was just, and when she thought they had all stopped, Ann Wedgwood would get off her bar stool, come down front, deliver a speech beautifully, and then tiptoe back upstage to wait for her next turn. You know, it was a nightmare. I would go daily to Shelley's hotel. She said she'd run lines with me. Well, she always found an excuse not to. She was sick. She was having her period. She was going through menopause. Her husband's family was in bad trouble in Italy. You know, just everything. And she'd be in bed with blinds. She had to bring up blinds, black blinds for her room. And Farley would come in with milkshakes. And I would beg them to run lines. They wouldn't. And it was just a nightmare. And finally, one day, it hit me. And I said, "You don't intend to learn these lines, do you?" They said, "Well, you know, my husband's family," and Farley said, "She's been so sick." I said, No, it's all right. I understand. I'm not going to push you any further." And they both, I said, "But I want one thing from you in return." I said, I'll sue the producer. He'll sue you, you know. "But I want one thing in return." They said, "What?" I said, "I want you both to get dressed up like movie stars and us go down to the dining room of this world-class hotel and have lunch in public." And then Shelley said, "Whee!" and got up and got into her bonbon and her jewels, and Farley went off and came back looking like an English gentleman. They were the best lunch companions in history. They knew everybody. They knew the dirt on everybody in art, science, politics, you name it. They opened the dining room for us. They saw that it was Shelley and took the ropes off. It was the loveliest lunch I ever had in my life. And the next day we opened. And the critics said, "Shelley Winters trapped in rambling, repetitious role. She skipped the country. I sued the producer sued her, my American career was over." And about 5 years later, some kids in Chicago did a production of Kennedy's Children. And it must have been wonderful because they won every prize. And they flew me there to see them get their prizes. And it was lovely. At a break in the ceremony, all the critics came to me and said, Bob, forgive us. How could we know?" That was my Shelley Winters.
And with that, let's open it up to questions here.
I just wanted to put a brief thing in. When Larry Kornfeld was directing Minnie's Boys about the Marx Brothers, and Shelley Winters was playing their mother, they scheduled the rehearsals at an unknown place so she couldn't come in and take over the rehearsal.
All through rehearsal, she'd say, No, Farley, don't read that line that way. Read it this way." It was just, it's horror. Who was it that said he thought he could sell tickets to a show called An Evening Without Shelley Winters? Now, here's the odd thing. I would go in and watch a few minutes of this thing they were calling Kennedy's Children. And then I'd go around the corner and buy a ticket and see Next Stop Greenwich Village with Shelley in it giving a brilliant, beautiful performance. I guess she took movies seriously because of the money or something. I don't know.
I went to see at South Coast Rep a Man in the Moon Marigolds with a little girl I had been on stage with at 12 years old in a play by Ronnie Tavel, and Shelley Winters was playing Crazy Betty the mom. And I said, "Lori, it's you. You're all grown up now. You're terrific." And shh, don't say it. Shelley she hits me on stage. She pinches me. Don't let her hear you.
Don't let her hear you compliment her. Yeah. Miss Siegel.
Hi. You mentioned something before, and I think it's really interesting. You said that, sitting down and trying to write an outline or anything is not really important. What's really important is that you write and you put something down on paper. And personally, I've been following that philosophy for a long time. It's probably why I never had anything produced, really. But I think that it's true. I think that a lot of people are bogged down with the concept of how to write and not just that they write.
But don't get me wrong. If an outline works for you, it's a good way to write.
No, that's-
Anything that gets you to writing.
Right.
That's my point. But you got to remember what the job is. Have that fantasy, write it down so other people can recreate it, so other people can experience it. That's the job. No matter how devious your approach to it. Eventually, a play is a program you feed into a computer called a theater. Your job is to program it so that that's why your fantasy has to be terribly clear in your mind so you know how to program it so the actors later will do it right. This is if you don't hire Shelley Winters. Don't feel like any way that you do it is wrong if it gets you doing it. Yeah, outlines are just fine. You can say, okay, I've written that scene. Cross it off and you have a real sense of accomplishment. Now on to that next scene. That's fine. It's just like studying a historical era. Anything that feeds it in and gets you going and gets it on the paper. No, yes?
You mentioned earlier that the moment you walked into Chino and met Joe Chino, that you fell in love with the whole field. Yeah. What was it about him that made this? Because everyone meets someone in their life that changes their life.
If I knew, I'd do it myself. I'd open a coffee house and do it myself for other people. Joe was basically quiet. He lived behind his coffee machine. He was a failed dancer, and I think there was a certain aura of it's all over about Joe, a certain sweet fatalism. He was gentle and understanding because he had been through something awful. He had gotten too fat to be a dancer, and he loved dancing and art. And I think that hung about him all the time. I have failed. It's horrible. And he would do anything to help other people not fail. You felt this concern and compassion.
And he said, do your own thing.
Do what you have to do.
Do what you have to do. Not
do your own thing. It was do what you have to do. In fact, that was scrawled in Italian over the door. But the subtext of it, do what you have to do. Here is a place you can do it. He was permissive and compassionate in the extreme, but never pretentious. I don't mean he came out and said, "Oh my dear," He was just there, and people would stand in front of him and talk and talk and talk. He'd make coffee for them and put it down, and then he'd reach up and take a calendar off the wall and say, "If you have a play, I got a date in May." Put it back, and half the time that person who may never have thought of writing a play would come back, maybe not in time for the May date, maybe for June, but he had put that in them. All your frustrations and things are very true and very valid and very important, but you don't have to have them here. And believe me, you didn't hear that a lot in the 50s. Everybody had lists of how you should be and what you should do. Those were the days of, what were some of those books? How to Win Friends and Influence People. There were how-to books about every kind of relationship. Joe just said, here's a floor. Do what you have to do on it.
And it wasn't a workshop to develop your play.
No.
It was do your play.
Yeah. I'll give you a couple examples. You all know Hair. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, Jerry Ragney, Jimmy Rado were actors, uptown actors. They were in Broadway shows, suit and tie actors, equity actors, Broadway actors. And they were boyfriends. And they came down to the Chino. Jimmy was only there a couple of times, but Jerry kept coming back. He was taken by the place in Joe. And he and Joe would often go in the back while shows were on to talk. And Jerry had become obsessed with the beautiful long-haired boys downtown. And Joe said, I can see that, yeah. Because there were a lot of them around the Chino. And finally Joe said, well, you can do a show here and cast them if you want to meet them. Well, the way that Jerry and Jimmy thought was very Broadway, very big, very, so they wound up doing the show at Joe Papp's Theater, which had grants and money and stuff. But Hair started right there from Jerry's frustrations and Joe's permissiveness. You can do it. Tom O'Horgan, who later directed Hair on Broadway. Tom was a down-at-the-mouth musician of all kinds.
Harpist.
I don't know how he was making it. Was he playing harp?
He played the harp for Second City,
Yeah.
and he'd tune it for a half an hour, and then when he'd start playing it, all the strings fell out.
Yeah. But Tom could play anything. And he stumbled into the Chino along with Harvey Milk. And Tom was just sad. He was kind of like, I guess life had come to not much. He was 30, 40, And Joe said, well, I showed him the stage, and Tom did 2 little reviews. It was really sort of the same review rewritten. And met Paul Foster, the playwright, at the Chino. And there was a new woman across town called Ellen Stewart who had a place called La Mama. And she got the idea to give them a workshop so that Paul and Tom could work on a play in a new way, not write a script and then direct it, but work with the actors and create this living, organic movement, sound, color. Jackie was in many of the La Mama troupe plays. She can tell you how it goes. And this blossomed into the style that became Hair and Superstar and Lion King and Cats and you name it. I mean, Tom O'Horgan and Paul Foster created modern theater. And as somebody said, Broadway never brought them lunch. But
We were in Yugoslavia, and it was still behind the Iron Curtain, and we were trying to get some props. And all we could find was these horrible plastic flowers. So we bought them, for pennies, and we pelted people with them all in England with Tom. I was in a troupe with Tom. And that throwing of the flowers, we think, started the flower children.
oh my God, Mary Sarah.
Plastic.
Well, little George Harris from La Mama.
Yeah.
You go see the portrait of the blonde boy putting the flower in the rifle?
Mm-hmm.
That's a La Mama kid.
Yeah.
George Harris. He later became Hibiscus and started this fantastic glitter drag troupe in San Francisco. Amazing people. Question.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
My question for you would be, if you could turn back time and change anything, would you? And if so, what would be the major thing that you would change in your life?
Well, to start with, I guess it does sound rough, but you have to remember, I didn't start out to have a life as an artist. It's been a dream. I mean, it's been a joy. Most of the bad things that have happened to me have been my own damn fault. I've been treated badly sometimes. When Kennedy's Children was opening on Broadway, we discovered that the New York Times, I'm telling this because this is a bad thing that was done to me. Okay, Kennedy's Children was this huge hit all over Europe and England, just a mess. Clive Barnes reviewed the London production and gave it this career-making rave. I mean, it's like, wow. So we got to America, and the Times sent someone to interview me, as you would expect. Well, backstage at the theater, I got a call from that Times interviewer a couple of days later. He said, I've got to talk to you. If you tell anyone this, I'll deny it. I can't go to the wall for you. I've been told to make you look like an idiot. It's a kill job. I said, well, thank you for warning me. Did they tell you why? He said, yes, all the critics in England criticized the Times for not discovering you. And so they've got to make you look like an idiot to get themselves off the hook. And indeed, when the article came out, there's hardly a word I said in it. It's all quoting every time the Times did mention me to prove that they discovered, and the picture they chose, out of all the pictures this portrait photographer took to them, they chose one where I'm wearing a leopard skin t-shirt and my hair is out like this and I look like a complete fool. And I was, like shaking. I thought, oh my God. And Clive Barnes, when he reviewed the Broadway production, you couldn't even tell if he liked it or not. He had obviously been told, just pass this one off. And my friends who they'd call the theater to buy tickets were told there were none available, that it was sold out, and it wasn't. And friends from out of town who tried to buy tickets from the ticket brokers were told it was sold out. So there was something afoot, That was really ugly, and that was hurtful not only to me, but not that I deserved it even, but certainly the other people it hurt didn't deserve any of it. That was the worst thing. I could tell you about all sorts of crazy theater owners and dishonest ones, people who stole from me, and people who treated everybody badly, but those are just par for the course. You know, you run into bad people. It got worse as it went along. I'm sorry, my theory about, you know, the negative narcissists, the people obsessed with hating themselves, I've run into it a lot lately. The last few theaters I've tried to work with were so unpleasant to go to. The people were so awful. Their behavior, moment by moment, was so unpleasant. I actually walked out on a show I had agreed to direct. And if you're going to ask Jackie, that's not something anybody would expect me to do. You know, I'll kill myself to get a show on.
Yeah.
But I won't sit around and be killed by other people to get one on. I actually walked out on a show, and I'm just shocked even saying that. That's how bad it got. And everybody around me just seems to take that kind of behavior for granted. I guess I just can't take it anymore. Yeah. Are you an actor? See, I'll be right with you. I was surprised on the show that I walked out on. I was surprised the actors didn't walk out because they were treating them just as badly. I mean, pointless, scathing, vicious insult at every turn, and mistreatment and mishandling, like scheduling rehearsals badly, or, you know, messing up people's time. Everything. I thought the whole cast would leave. Nobody did. The show went on. Yeah. I agreed to come see the last performance, and they forgot. They didn't even bother to tell me. They never even sent me a poster. I said, "Oh, take the show." I didn't charge them any royalties. I agreed to let them do it for 6 weeks. They wanted 4 more. I gave it to them for free. All I wanted was a poster. They've never even sent me a poster. I mean, these are okay. Enough of that. Yes.
I find you very inspiring. The evening began with Dan posing a question about ideas. Where do you get your ideas? And you very wisely said we all have ideas all the time. But not all ideas are good ideas. They're not all worthy of committing to the extent that writing a play will mean committing to. I mean, writing a play means you're...
Okay, may I ask, are you then going to sit waiting until you get the good idea? Or are you going to write whatever idea you've got and be learning to write better while you do it, so that you are geared up when the good news... You see...
No, I'm going to rationalize wasting my time.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about before. This...
It's a great answer.
If you're thinking about your characters, you're not going to be thinking further down the line. Yes, of course, you obviously, if you're writing and feel there's some value in it, keep writing until you get to those values. Or you might write a play that's kooky and eccentric and isn't going to appeal to people. But what are you going to do if you're, just keep writing. Or have another one in the works that you do believe in.
That's a great answer.
Or say, okay, I know that a kid's play about not taking grown-ups' medicine would be of value. I'll write that. Write that instead. Maybe it won't inspire you. Maybe you'll never finish it, but you'll feel good about it. Mm-hmm. I don't think... I probably saw several... I've been here since '93. How many years is that now? 19?
Yeah.
I probably saw 20 shows the first year I was here, and I doubt if I've seen that many since. I don't know. I just don't... Since I'm not doing it anymore, I find myself not all that interested. But I certainly enjoy a good show when I see one. And certainly in line, this may have been your next question, no theater here in LA has shown any interest in me being here or my work at all. This has rather baffled me. I would have thought there would have been some feelers, but and what's more, I've sent plays to every theater that I could find out to whom you send plays. I've sent not just one, but dozens, and well, maybe not dozens, but just lately I did a big send out by email of plays to 30 or 40 theaters here in LA, and I didn't even get a rejection slip. I don't know what it is, but somehow the theatrical world, as far as producers are concerned, lost all interest in me about 1990. It's a shame. I got some great unproduced plays. Yes. Oh, Jason, hi.
Hi. I never got to be around Cafe Chino, but I did get to be around Robert Patrick as his assistant in the early 80s, and that's when I fell in love with the theater. So thank
when
you.
I was running the
Fifth Estate
Fifth Estate Theater. I came out here in 81 or 2, was it? A wonderful man named Smitty had a theater called the Deja Vu, and he'd done a number of my plays. And I came out, and he wanted to open, the building next to him was vacant, and he wanted to open a second theater. So I said, well, I'll run it if you'll let me do gay plays. Do you have to go? Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Did I get your email address?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So I said, if I can make it a gay theater. He said, sure. So for a year, I ran a gay theater on Kenmore Street, right across from that deserted market. And it was an absolute joy. Jason was around very much and always very helpful. I'm not sure which was the best Blues for Boys, but the one we did there was sure near to it. It's possible the one I did Blues for Boys is online. I have the last New York production of Blues for Boys is online, and I got a new tape of it, and it's much better. It looks good. You can see 22 of my plays online, long and short, and then there's about 50 scripts online. In case you want to test further, I know what I'm talking about. I never ask people to take it on faith. More? Are you?
We have time for about one more question, if anyone would.
Okay, I don't feel like I've said anything of value at all.
Actually, I think you said a lot of value.
Yeah, okay, good.
If it weren't for the fact that I will be able to get the tape later, I would be taking notes. But one of the things, going back to the craft issues, and you talked about how it was sort of all up here when you were asked about outlining, and I'm curious about rewriting. To what extent do you rewrite?
Well, once you get the thing on paper, you can do anything with it you want. For instance, if there's things you're ashamed of, don't worry, get it on paper. Nobody else has to see it. You can go through and alter it to where anything that you're ashamed for people to know you think is said by the villain. You know what I mean? Or if you think your story is too depressing, once you've got it down, you can say, okay, that's the subplot. The plot is going to be about somebody who overcomes that problem, and this story about somebody who does not overcome it and fails and dies will be a subplot. You see what I mean? You can do anything. There's so much you can do once you've got it on paper. But you have to give yourself something to alter. Give yourself something to change. And, when I said it's all up here, I mean it's all up here. But your job is to get it out. No, I mean, a play is not up here. Your fantasy is up here.
Sure.
And you just... Who was it that wrote... Who was it that said, I write hello, and then I sit there till somebody answers? You don't even have to write dialogue. You can just write your thoughts. Anything that gets you writing is fine. And after a while, you've got that thought down. Write somebody's response to that thought. And after 50 pages of that, you might get to the start of a play.
Yes.
But it may take all of that for you to admit what it is that's bothering you. Okay, so we have a certain number of women here. Women have had a special problem in the last 30 or 40 years as writers. Women feel obligated to write feminist, pro-women, pro-feminism work, novels, plays. Most of them don't get finished. And you know why? They're not angry. They're not true. They're what you think you ought to think. I don't mean you specifically. They're what women try to write what they think they ought to think about. And they don't write those first words, which are, I'm so mad, I'm so hurt, I don't understand why my life is like this. Then you write one character that says that, and let it go. Let it get there. Maybe it'll get finally to the person who has the correct thoughts and the correct attitudes and who has the correct, politically correct outcome. But I know so many women who want to write it are blocked because they want to start right out putting themselves in a straitjacket, and they're not going to admit that there is a problem being a woman. And you say, well, then what is this about, Am I making sense? Mm-hmm. Tell me. And the same thing, anybody who's trying to write according to any political or ethical program, there's a great danger of writing these dull, dead things whose subject really is, I have correct thoughts. Anybody see The Help?
Yeah.
I was so angry. They had that great story and they had those great actresses, And not in the writing, but in the acting. They turned it into just what I'm talking about. All the black people had depth, richness, warmth, fullness, every human quality. All the white people were these politically incorrect paper dolls. They didn't really believe what they were doing. They were not human beings with a belief system, with any depth, with any character. They obviously were not dangerous to anybody because they were just things you could topple over. So even those brilliant black actresses looked silly to be so angry at these cardboard characters. I wanted to go to, well, not only can you act that way and mess something up, you can write that way. And I think we've all seen examples of it on TV morning shows. What do they call those shows on the weekends? Some of them are Christian-based, but others are just family movies where everything is just PG. and
The Disney Channel.
is it like that? Okay. More.
Actually, I think we have come to the perfect end.
Thank you all so much. Now I want to tell you how this happened. I told Ms. Berkowitz here that I was going to do him too. The Alliance of Los Angeles Playwrights has lovely little meetings where everybody gets together and folds that month's newsletter and stuffs it in envelopes. Okay? During one of those, Mr. Berkowitz turned to me and said, "Bob, could we do an evening with Robert Patrick sometime?" I thought he meant we would be in somebody's house and do this envelope stuffing, and then after having done it, we'd sit around and we'd chat. Only after I'd agreed to do it, did I go to one of these stuffing things, and here was the newsletter I was stuffing, and it said, "At the Pico Theater on week, blah, 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 it's $7. Robert. I didn't know we were going to do this. I thought it was going to be chatting over cocoa.
Well, maybe chatting over
So that's
food.
just you. Thank you all very much.